Looking forward to the conversation today. All right, with that, why don't we get started? Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Good afternoon, and welcome to the GusNIP Farm Bill Advocacy webinar. I'm Mark Nicholson, Federal Policy Lead for Fair Food Network, where I also facilitate our national collaboration with GusNIP stakeholders through the Alliance for National Nutrition Incentives. ANNI is a collective of state, regional, and national stakeholders seeking to advance common priorities for the Gus Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program in the Farm Bill. For more information on the Alliance and its members, please visit the Who Are We section in the GusNIP website, which is fruitvegincentives.org. I'll be leading us through today's briefing on the Farm Bill landscape, GusNIP marker bills, and to review the tools available to support your efforts educating members of Congress on the opportunities to strengthen and expand GusNIP. Our agenda kicks off today with an overview of the Farm Bill landscape and how this could impact GusNIP. And that'll be presented by Katie Nasons with the Tory Advisory Group. That's going to be followed by briefings on some key GusNIP marker bills that have been introduced into Congress with the goal of influencing what the House and Senate Agriculture Committees include in the Farm Bill. We'll be joined by legislative staff from some of the congressional offices sponsoring these bills as their schedules allow, since the chamber is in session today. Then we'll wrap things up with Jess McCarran from the Signal Group, who will walk us through the educational and advocacy tools that can help you respond to potential calls to action once the Farm Bill starts moving through Congress. We encourage you to use the Q&A function during the webinar to share your questions and to engage with other webinar participants throughout the presentation. We will try and address questions throughout the webinar as time allows. In order to keep things moving, I've asked our presenters to provide a brief introduction prior to their presentations. With that, let's dive right in with Katie's Washington, D.C. update.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for the kind introduction. Hello, everyone. I am Katie Nasons, and I work with the Tory Advisory Group. We are a multi-client consulting firm here in DC that focuses on food and agriculture policy. And so today I am just going to present a little bit around the Farm Bill landscape, talk a little bit about some of the historic timelines, and give you some of the outside factors that are kind of impacting the potential timeline going into this year. Hopefully I can answer any questions. If you have any while I'm talking, I'll try to get to those at the end of my presentation. But yeah, I hope that this is a good conversation, and I hope that it gets everybody thinking a little bit more about the 2024 Farm Bill process, which we had all hoped would be the 2023 Farm Bill process. So to kick things off, I think everybody on this call probably knows that the Farm Bill is a 5-year Farm Bill that reauthorizes all of the programs and resources that USDA administers. The last Farm Bill expired on September 30th of 2023. This was the 2018 Farm Bill that had been passed. And last fall, once that expired, Congress decided to extend it for an additional year. Now, what that means is that we are still going to be facing some of those same timeline challenges going into the fall of 2024, because the Farm Bill was only extended for a year. We're going to have to see some kind of congressional action on it later on this fall, no matter what happens. But While Congress did decide to extend some of those authorities, Congress also put in some additional funding into a bunch of the key programs that we like to call orphan programs. And these are a handful of programs that receive money through the Farm Bill process instead of what's called our annual appropriations process. And those orphan programs, some examples of those can be things like the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, which provides grants and funds for different research programs. The Organic Cost Share is another example of an orphan program. And some of the citrus disease research that happens is an example of another orphan program. So just to kind of put that into context, Congress did provide an additional year of funding for all 23 of those orphan programs. But we don't know what's going to happen going into the fall and whether or not they're going to be able to find those additional resources. The good news about the GusNIP program is that it was given the status of mandatory baseline during the 2018 Farm Bill. So no matter what happens with this particular Farm Bill, even if it doesn't get reauthorized or if it gets extended and there isn't new money allocated to the Farm Bill, the GusNIP program will continue because it has that status of mandatory baseline funding. So that is the good news in terms of where we're at with GusNIP. Another big thing that's kind of gone into this Farm Bill process are all of the new players that have been a part of the 2023-24 Farm Bill negotiations. We've had new leadership in both the House and the Senate. Chairman G.T. Thompson, this is the very first Farm Bill that he has been able to lead in that role. Same with Ranking Member David Scott. And in the Senate, Senator Bozeman is in his leadership role around the Farm Bill for the very first time. So it's really interesting because the only person who has done a Farm Bill from kind of one of those four corners has been Senator Stabenow. And that kind of leads me to the next piece, which is, what are some of these outside factors that are impacting the current Farm Bill process? And Senator Stabenow has announced that she is going to be retiring. And so retirements can absolutely have an impact on getting a Farm Bill done or not. It's going to be challenging because on the one hand, I think Senator Stabenow is going to be very interested in cementing her legacy in a Farm Bill. But she has also said, too, that she doesn't want to see a Farm Bill that takes away things that she has prioritized in the past. So I think depending upon how she starts to feel towards the end of her term, I think that will absolutely have an impact on whether or not the Farm Bill gets done this particular Congress. Another really important factor is the economy. And the economy not only weighs into how much particular programs cost, whether that's, the farm economics of low commodity prices and needing some of that additional assistance to make sure that farmers have what they need to stay afloat. Or if we have a good or bad economy that impacts how many people are utilizing programs like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And so every year, the Congressional Budget Office does a good, thorough analysis of how much money the Farm Bill is currently spending. And it looks at all of those different economic factors that can either dictate that the bill is spending a lot of money or that the bill is saving more money in a particular year. So the economy has another really big impact. This year, the election is going to have another big impact on whether or not the Farm Bill gets done. And I think that, we have been seeing a lot of debate in the press. I think that, when you look at the makeup and the map of the election, in the Senate, it's going to be a tough election year for Democrats. We've seen some of those retirements that are also impacting Senator Manchin, for example, leaving in West Virginia. That is a prime seat that is likely to flip. In the House, I think we're starting to see a little bit more uncertainty around whether or not, it will stay under Republican control or if it will flip. And so I think that there's an opportunity and a chance that both chambers may flip. I think it's probably way too soon to speculate about the presidential election, but that will absolutely have an impact on the Farm Bill process. And so, if we do see both chambers of the House and Senate flip, and we see, potential changes with the presidency, that will absolutely dictate how much anybody wants to get done before the end of the year. So I think there's still a lot to be seen on that front, but that will absolutely continue to play a role in whether or not we're able to get something done. And then I would say the last really big impact has really been around the appropriations process and timeline. When the Farm Bill expired last September, it also expired at the same time as the annual appropriations bill. And I don't think anybody thought, 6 months later, we would see ourselves continuing to have negotiations and continuing to discuss the appropriations bill for FY 2024. And so I think that, that distraction and that work has really taken away from the ability to secure floor time and to secure leadership's attention on important matters like the Farm Bill. And so that cycle and that process is also impacting the timeline and how we're able to get things done. I would also say that kind of in conjunction with appropriations, we've also had some of the bigger Farm Bill negotiation fights that have happened kind of outside of the Farm Bill process. So last summer, folks may recall there was a deal on the debt limit. And in that deal, there were some changes to the SNAP program. And everybody said, okay, there was a bite at the apple to work on the SNAP program here. And so nothing else can change. And then I think during this appropriations process, there have also been a lot of conversations around WIC funding. And while WIC isn't part of the Farm Bill, those negotiations and conversations around the nutrition title have really taken some of the oxygen out of the room to try to make some really radical changes or really different changes in the Farm Bill process. So all of that to say, that really has a big impact on the overall politics in both the House and the Senate. I think it's really important to note that, particularly in the House, there is a very narrow margin, 219 Republicans and 213 Democrats. And so you're talking about a very small window of votes that could vote against a Farm Bill in order to get something across the House floor. Another really big interesting factor in the House is the current House floor rule that would allow for an open amendment process. And what the open amendment process rule does is it allows any member of Congress to offer up an amendment on any provision that they want to on a piece of legislation. And so I think a big fear that a lot of folks have in the food and agriculture community is that if the Farm Bill makes it to the floor, there could be what are called poison pill amendments that would be offered up that would be too extreme on either side of the aisle for people to be able to vote on something to get it done. And so that is one of the big challenges that leadership in the House is facing around trying to get a Farm Bill onto the House floor. I think in all likelihood, and I'm speculating here with congressional staffers on the call, so I hope they'll correct me later if they think something different. But I do think that the likely scenario could be that the House Agriculture Committee has the opportunity to take up a Farm Bill that is a very moderate version of the Farm Bill in committee and vote on it there. I think in terms of being able to get that floor time, it's going to be a lot more of a challenge given kind of all of those other factors between the election and some of the rules on the floor to be able to take that up for a vote. I do think that, it is likely that there will be some kind of committee markup that happens either later this spring or early this summer in the House. And we know that, the committee is really looking for those bipartisan opportunities to have a bill come out of committee. And so we have been told that right now, the committee staff is having conversations around, who is out there that supports moving some funding around within the bill. One of the pots of funding, or the three pots of funding that House Republicans are looking at, are moving funds out of the Inflation Reduction Act, which put a significant amount of money into USDA's conservation programs to focus on climate. There's also been conversations around making changes to the Thrifty Food Plan to find savings in the nutrition title to move around. And then there's also been conversation around making changes to the Commodity Credit Corporation in order to find some additional funds for different priorities in other titles. So we know that those conversations are active and happening, and it's yet to be seen exactly what all of that might look like. But that's a real quick update in the House. The Senate side is in a little bit of a different position right now. We do know that there have been kind of bigger political conversations at play. We have seen, the stalling of some of the traditional negotiation because there's been a bit of an impasse around funding. And I think right now, both the Democrats and Republicans have really kind of put a red line in the sand of, on the Democratic side, Senator Stabenow has made it very clear that she doesn't want to touch any of the Inflation Reduction Act funding, and she is not willing to make any cuts to nutrition. And that is kind of where she is coming from starting those negotiations. On the Republican side, Senator Bozeman has said very clearly that he wants to see additional funds going into those commodity reference prices. A lot of those farmers have been struggling and prices have been low, and it's been really tough to keep those farmers on the farm. And so in both scenarios, we've seen I think both sides kind of dig in a little bit. And now with the uncertainty around the election and the uncertainty around, how the government is, well, hopefully going to be funded this week. But some of these other factors, I think we are really starting to see a little bit of a slow walking on the Senate side in terms of being able to get something done. I will say if I had a crystal ball and we were to look at, what does this actually mean for a farm bill getting done in 2024? I think the best likelihood that we have is looking at a farm bill after the election. I think we will still likely see some of that committee action happen in the House sometime later this spring. Maybe we'll see something in the Senate. I think that there is an interest and commitment from folks, but I think they're still trying to navigate through some of those really big funding challenges. But I don't think that we will see anything on either the House or the Senate floor until after the election, just kind of given the timelines, given where the conversation has been. However, I could be totally wrong. But I will say that's my likely prediction. I think, depending upon what happens with the election, things could get pushed off until 2025, particularly if there are some substantial changes in leadership, and if there is interest from some of those new members who may be coming in to kind of put their own mark on what a potential new farm bill would look like. I think most notable is that no matter what happens in the election, we will see at least one new leader of kind of those four leadership roles in both the House and the Senate, and that will be Senator Klobuchar coming in as either the new ranking member or chairwoman of the Agriculture Committee when Senator Stabenow retires. So there's a lot there. There's a lot of different impacts, a lot of different things that could happen. But there's also a lot of opportunity to stay engaged. And so I think one of the things that other folks are going to talk about is, ways for people to continue the advocacy, continue the opportunity to invite more members of Congress to come and see the work that you're doing. The one good thing and the silver lining about possibly having a farm bill delay is that it just gives everyone more time to educate folks about the GusNIP program, about nutrition incentives, about produce prescriptions. And so with that, I think I'm running up on time here, and it's a perfect segue to turn it over to the folks who are going to talk a little bit more about their marker bills in the next section. So Mark, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Katie. Excellent update. And for those who are thinking that this farm bill may never happen, I don't know what the odds are in Vegas on it right now, but as you heard from Katie, we're definitely potentially in for a long haul. And after the election would be, a lame duck session. So really in the December timeframe, just to give you some timing around what that could look like. So thanks, Katie. And yes, that's a great segue into the next part of our agenda. So first, I do want to say that we do greatly, appreciate the support of the Tory Advisory Group. They've been providing the alliance and, guidance in our GusNIP Farm Bill campaign. I want to acknowledge Barbara Patterson and Ashley Smith on that team as well. Now let's turn to briefings on key marker bills. There are a number of key marker bills that ANI, the Alliance for National Nutrition Incentives, is supporting and has worked with congressional staff in getting introduced. These bills are important pieces to an overall legislative puzzle that we're putting together to strengthen and expand SNAP nutrition incentives and produce prescriptions through GusNIP. One way you can help us to make sure that your members of Congress are aware of GusNIP is through these marker bills. And so we'll be talking about the GusNIP Improvement Act, which is in the Senate. We'll also be talking about the GusNIP Expansion Act, which is in the House. And then there is also the OSNAP Act, which is in both chambers. More details on where to find information on Farm Bill priorities, talking points, and tools for educating and engaging will be shared at the end of the webinar. And now I would like to invite Megan with Senator Hirono's office to introduce herself and share some highlights on the GusNIP Improvement Act.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Katie, for such a comprehensive overview of all the politics around this very large piece of legislation, very important. I'm Megan O'Connor, and I cover nutrition for Senator Hirono of Hawaii, and I'm happy to see some Hawaii representation on the call today, too. Senator Hirono spent a lot of time leading up to the sort of Farm Bill season, assessing what types of changes would best benefit the GusNIP program that we have in Hawaii, which is very popular and really helps a lot of families. And through those conversations, we found sort of two general buckets of need. One would be increasing the overall funding to the program, and two relates to sort of bringing GusNIP into the next phase of what the program can look like nationally. So S 2577, the GusNIP Improvement Act, would, we think, do both of those things. And we did take the ideas that we had and worked with Mark and the coalition to make them work for more than just Hawaii. So hopefully they will help with all the states that are either have a robust GusNIP program or hoping to stand up a GusNIP program. So the bill would increase the overall funding to GusNIP, and this includes to produce prescription and to technical assistance, the whole umbrella, to $150 million a year from the $50-ish million a year that it is right now. And we feel that that increase is necessary to accommodate the structural changes to the program included in the bill. So the first structural change would be to decrease the share that states would be required to pay and increase the federal share. Right now it's 50-50, and the bill would decrease it to 90% federal, 10% local. I don't know that I would consider that realistic ultimate position that this change would end up at, but I do think that there's a good opportunity to reduce the match slightly to remove some of that financial burden from the local partners on this program. So we wanted to make sure that we were aiming high with the sort of the expectation that that could get negotiated a little closer to 50-50 now, but still removing some of that financial burden from the local partners. In addition to that, the bill would allow the bill sort of sections out GusNIP into two separate tiers. It would keep the existing grant program for new or recently stood up programs that are still working to get well established in their states. And then it would create a new tier that would be geared towards scaling existing well established programs. So in Hawaii and in a couple dozen other states at this point, programs are at a point where they're popular, people know about them, and they don't necessarily need to be built or changed structurally. The only thing they need to do is grow participation and grow the amount of SNAP dollars that are being spent in the program. So the goal of this tier would be to take those programs and let them continue to grow participation, continue to grow dollar spend within the program. And then under produce prescription programs, there would be a similar two-tier structure implemented, viewed as one tier aimed at seeding new programs and one tier aimed at scaling well-established programs. Produce prescription is a little bit differently. I know there's a lot of conversation in the food as medicine community about what the future of produce prescription should look like and how that should be structured within the federal agencies. And so we are sort of thinking of this as an intermediary stage for produce prescription to give a little bit more time to figure out what that program looks like in the future. So that's sort of a brief overview of the GusNIP Improvement Act. I think in terms of state of play, we've talked to both Senator Stabenow's committee staff and Senator Bozeman's committee staff. There seems to be pretty universal agreement that GusNIP is a great program. No one disputes that. The outcomes are tangible and measurable. Even in Hawaii, we're lucky to have a year-round growing season and local fresh produce available year-round. Other states don't have that. And even with those two types of programs, we still see a lot of success. So I think there's no concern about the program itself running into any issues, but we do run into the issue of the overall funding of the Farm Bill. And if we are adding money to this program, do we need to take it away from another program? Particularly, does that money have to come from something else within the nutrition title? And so I think that the support for the program is there. It's just figuring out where it fits in the larger puzzle of the Farm Bill, and in particular, the nutrition title. I think that's it. Thank you.
Excellent, Megan. And Megan actually did offer to answer questions that folks might have. And you can, use the Q&A for that. And if there are some, if someone wants to come off of and speak to a question, we can do that too. So I'll just give that a minute for folks to consider that. And then we'll be teeing up our next speakers. If not, Megan is going to be, you'll be on for a little bit to answer anything that pops up in the Q&A. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Megan. We really, really appreciate Senator Hirono's champion of the GusNIP Improvement Act. And, you know, it's been wonderful working with your team there. It's been a while. Yeah, we did a lot of this work for the 2023 Farm Bill, and we did that in advance. And so the foundation's been laid for the ongoing efforts for the Farm Bill. So thank you. All right. Now we're going to turn to the bipartisan GusNIP Expansion Act. This marker bill was introduced in the House by Republican Congressman Rick Crawford from Arkansas, along with Democratic Congressman Dan Kildee from Michigan. The goals of this bill are similar to the GusNIP Improvement Act, with the intent to reduce program barriers and to enable more partners to participate. So I'll just share some of the specifics, top lines, and then Rachel, if you could bring James on and have him join us here. I'm going to invite James to share some commentary as well. But specifically, the GusNIP Expansion Act, you heard Megan talking about in the Senate, how that bill is reducing the match requirement. In the House, the GusNIP Expansion Act is doing the same thing, but their reduction is down to 20% of the non-federal share. So again, a significant reduction in the match from the 50% level currently. The GusNIP Expansion Act also creates new cooperative agreements with USDA to support scaling incentive programs statewide. And again, as Megan spoke to a little bit, making sure that USDA has a focus on not just the pilot and standard and large scale programming that they're doing, but also is adding a focus on scaling and doing it in a way that coordinates both what NIFA and FNS are doing. So that was the intent in some of that language. The bill also directs USDA to implement larger scale produce prescription pilots in an effort to get data to help their ability to expand and make the clinical case in Medicare, Medicaid, and with healthcare providers. This bill also increases funding for the Nutrition Incentive Hub. And so I know most folks on this call engaged with the hub at some point, and we wanted to make sure that those resources continued in the next Farm Bill. And it also prioritizes grants for fruit and vegetable incentive projects that are working in a variety of retail settings, such as farmers markets and independent retailers, and the language specifies that. And so with that, joining us today from Representative Crawford's office is James Hodges. James, I've asked James to provide a quick intro and share some perspectives on why Congressman Crawford is leading on this bill, and then just any other insights that he can share from the House Agriculture Committee side, because Representative Crawford serves on that committee. So James, it's all yours.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me, Mark? Okay.
James,
good.
I can hear you. You should be good.
Good. All right. I just want to make sure. As Mark was saying, my name is James Hodges. I work for Representative Rick Crawford. He is a Republican member of the House who represents the 1st District of Arkansas. So our district encompasses mainly, it's anchored in the northeast portion of Arkansas, but it covers the entire eastern border of Arkansas down the Mississippi River, which is an area called the Delta. And the Delta, and there might be some people on the call from the Delta, but it's one of the poorest regions in the country. And so the nutrition title and obviously the biggest program, SNAP, are very important to our constituents, very important to our region, and by extension, so is the GusNIP program. If we're going to have so many constituents utilizing SNAP, we want to make sure they're getting nutritious food, fruits and vegetables, and GusNIP helps in that. We have teamed up, as was mentioned, with Representative Kildee's office to introduce the bipartisan marker bill, the GusNIP Expansion Act. We teamed up with Representative Kildee's office because back in 2020, we led a letter with Representative Kildee along with 70 other bipartisan members of Congress to get $75 million of emergency funding for GusNIP during the pandemic. And that letter was successful because the 75 million was allotted for that. And so we've partnered back up with them again to introduce this bill. They've been great partners with us. There's a staffer over there named Grace who I've worked with. Unfortunately, she was unable to make it on the call, but a very good partner in this project. We also in our district, we've used the Double Up Food Bucks program from GusNIP. So that's been another reason why we were behind this bill. As far as the process moving forward goes, I honestly think Megan hit it pretty well. It's a popular program, so it's going to remain in the Farm Bill. I've talked with the House Ag Committee. It's going to remain in the Farm Bill. It will be funded. But sort of the issues around funding, where are there going to need to be cuts, things like that, those are still sort of in the works. And some of the particulars that Mark went through and Megan went through in her bill are still being discussed. A marker bill doesn't necessarily mean that everything in these bills will make it into the Farm Bill. It also, the House and the Senate versions, what they come up with will probably be different. And so when the House comes out with their version of the Farm Bill and when the Senate comes out with their version of the Farm Bill, there'll still be times for amendments to see what can be changed or improved. And then when the House passes their version and the Senate passes their version, there will be what is called a conference committee, where the House and the Senate will both send members who will negotiate and come out with a final product. I also want to say that I think this was mentioned in the first presentation that we're hopeful we get a Farm Bill, but as we get closer to a presidential election, it does make it a little more tough just with the political fraught nature of that. So lame duck sessions, it is easier to get a Farm Bill across, so that might be something we end up doing, but we're still hopeful and wanting to get something done this year. And lastly, I want to say I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we have a health fellow in our office. Her name's Amelia Matthews. She's on the call today, and she is going to go back to medical school when she's done with us tomorrow, and she's going to become a doctor. And she's been working on the GusNIP program back in our district, and has also is a big supporter of the produce prescription program. So that's something that I assume she'll be utilizing in her practice someday. So thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, James. Appreciate you joining. And I appreciate you reminding folks about the role that both Representative Crawford and Kildee played in helping to secure the GusNIP COVID emergency funding. And so that effort to get $51 million, that was the original ask, that did turn into 75 million. We very much appreciate your leadership and the staff's work on all that. So thank you very much. And also thank you for mentioning the work that Grace Banfield is doing on Representative Kildee's team on behalf of this as well. Very exciting to have a bipartisan bill in this chamber. And like you said, very happy to hear that it's something that the Ag Committee staff are, looking very seriously at and how they incorporate, our recommendations through your marker bill into the final Farm Bill text. And then the work that may lie ahead for trying to turn that into, a final bill for all of us. So thanks again, James.
Thank you.
All right, now I did want to take this last moment before we invite Jess McCarron on to provide a little bit of an update on one other marker bill that is out there for GusNIP. And so that marker bill is the OSNAP Act, which was introduced by Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey and Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester from Delaware. And this is a bicameral bill. So in other words, it's the same exact bill in both the House and Senate. And we really appreciate those offices. Senator Booker introduced this initially in the Senate, and we did a lot of work with their team. And the bill is really helpful in the sense that it's notable because it increases funding significantly and eliminates the match. And while, as you heard from some of these staffers, even some of the incremental things we're trying to achieve are going to be challenging, it is very helpful to have a bill like the OSNAP Act that increases GusNIP funding to $700 million annually. And again, fully eliminates the non-federal match. Now, while we don't really think that's in play, we do not expect it to achieve those particular goals in this farm bill. The OSNAP Act is important for communicating to Congress the scale of need of the program. This funding level aligns with the Colorado State University return on investment study that identified the cost of getting to 80% of farmers markets and 60% of retailers at $600 million to $1.2 billion annually. And notably, the study also showed that when GusNIP operates at that scale, we can achieve as high as a 3-to-1 return on investment. So that bill is, really represents the current scale and need. It is aspirational for sure, but it's also an important talking point as we engage on the Hill. In the time we have remaining, we are going to turn now to Jess McCarron at the Signal Group. I don't know if Rachel, if you've been able to bring Jess on yet on the panel. But before Jess gets started, I did want to just wrap up the Hill conversations by saying once again, it's great to hear from the staff and the offices that are doing this work. They've been great partners, and what will help them, and Jess is going to talk to this a bit, so I think, Rachel, you can spotlight Jess now. The next steps, the ongoing steps, keeping this drumbeat going, really requires engagement from the broad stakeholder community that is supporting and advocating for GusNIP. And that's where all of you come into play. And so we're hopeful that we've been able to create and make available tools that'll help you in engagement, because even though we're not going to be looking at a farm bill in the next few weeks or months, as Katie pointed out, this extended opportunity does allow for more time to engage and educate, particularly when they head back to the district and they're starting to campaign. And so Jess is going to now walk us through some of those tools that we have available to help support the ongoing engagement and give you, these are things that I hope you take some time to familiarize yourself with during this calm before the storm, so to speak, and prepare for when we do have calls to action, because they're going to come fast and furious when they do, and we'll have little time to kind of really do the preparation work. So now's the time to prepare for those. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jess to run us through some of those GusNIP advocacy and educational tools.
Thanks, Mark, and hi, everyone. So just to give a quick introduction, I'm Jess McCarron, and I'm Executive Vice President at Signal Group. We're a strategic communications, digital, and public affairs firm based in DC, and we support the Fair Food Network and the Annie Coalition's communications efforts around GusNIP and the Farm Bill. And before I was with Signal, similar to Katie, who I think you all heard from earlier on the call, I worked on the Senate Agriculture Committee during the last Farm Bill. I was their press secretary and also spent some time at USDA in their communications office. And so when it comes to different policies in the Farm Bill like GusNIP, storytelling is really important, and having that big tent coalition is critical to demonstrate both the broad support that these policies have from influential organizations like yourselves, and also the impact that it has to farmers and families and communities on the ground. And that really gives cover to members of Congress to champion these policies and show how they are helping people on the ground in their state. And so, as Mark mentioned, we developed a suite of resources that all of you can use to showcase that broad support and also make clear how GusNIP is making a difference in people's lives and why it's really important that we strengthen and expand it in the upcoming Farm Bill. And so I'm going to share my screen and just walk through the resources so you all know where to find them. And when the time comes, we do a push or a week of action around any inflection points coming up, it'll be easy to access them. So pulling up the homepage of the fruitvegincentives.org website, if you go over to the resources page, you can find a collection of different things that can help you talk about the Farm Bill and make that case in key states and nationally as well. If you go down to the different featured resources, the GusNIP Farm Bill talking points, it looks like this document. There's a lot of really great messaging in here that is available to help you make that case, and some helpful proof points to utilize as you're talking about GusNIP and why Congress needs to take action in the Farm Bill. We also have a one-pager that can be used that outlines exactly how GusNIP works, how Congress can help more people benefit from it, and then some of the different marker bills that we discussed on this call, including the one that Mark just talked about, the SNAP Act. That's all included in this fact sheet, and it can be helpful for member education and also education at your organizations, and just letting people know what GusNIP is and how it's helping people. Back on the website, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom to the quick links for community advocates, these are a lot of great resources. We've got the talking points and one pager, as I mentioned, but also some templates. There's a letter of support to Congress that constituents in key states can use to reach out to their member of Congress, and some placeholders to fill in to add some personalization so that these really make an impact. We also have some template letters to the editor that you can submit, and some submission ideas to help you get these placed in different local newspapers. And then we also have an op-ed template that is an outline to help you write a personalized op-ed about why GusNIP is important and why Congress needs to take action. As the Farm Bill develops, we'll be updating resources here, so encourage everyone to bookmark this page, and we'll be sending out any emails with once things are added, and letting folks know when to take action. With that, I can take any questions folks have. Or anything to add, Mark?
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, I think some folks were asking about marker bills. And so the GusNIP one pager, that link to that one pager is definitely my recommended go-to resource for the marker bill numbers and a brief summary of the bills. And it's all on a page with more information on GusNIP. So that one is ideal for, as Jess mentioned, internal education, but also on the Hill. I think one thing, and we've been at this Farm Bill process so long now, we forget about some of the things we originally were trying to address when we started and created these tools. One of the big ones is that there are so many new Hill staffers, and this is their first Farm Bill. And there's members of Congress that this is their first Farm Bill. And I think after, I had over 100 Hill meetings last year, I think my one takeaway is just never assume anybody knows anything there. Don't assume your elected officials, even in your own districts, have any idea that this program exists. One of the greatest things that you could do in the weeks and months ahead, and not waiting for calls to action, is just make sure that you're have communication, outreach with the district staff that are in the district offices for your elected officials. That is a great way to make sure that that office has you on the radar. And it's a great way, especially to have the district folks see who the coalition members are. One of the great strengths of GusNIP, and while it's a challenge, but the fact that we've all had to go and get matching funding and create coalitions really positions the program nationally in a strong place for grassroots advocacy. So take advantage of what you've built, lean into those coalitions, and start next week with just reaching out to those offices, sharing the one pager, sharing information on the program, and inviting those members of Congress to come visit your programs and program sites. Spring is a great time. Farmers markets will be reopening across the country, and it's a great time to engage. We have had many success stories here in Washington from members of Congress going to a farmer's market and seeing this program in action. The number one on that list is G.T. Thompson, who is the current chair of the House Ag Committee, the Republican chair of that committee, who, when he saw this program in action and folks using their SNAP dollars and using their incentive dollars to purchase blueberries, it really brought home to him, the strength of the program. So that's my invitation to you all, and I think that's where we'll start wrapping things up. In closing, I do want to thank so much the presenters and our partners who shared the information today, and thanking all of you for the time that you've spent with us and all of the work that you do implementing these programs and engaging in your districts and in your states. We'll have more information as the Farm Bill landscape evolves. Hopefully our next updates will be around opportunities to educate and advocate for these legislative priorities to strengthen and expand GusNIP over the next 5 years when there is something in motion on the Farm Bill. And then really just please also consider subscribing to updates by visiting the website that Jess was highlighting there, fruitvegincentives.org. If you go to the Get Involved section, you can subscribe there. And we will be following up for folks who registered for today's webinar with links to some of these resources and a link to the recording of the webinar. So I think that really wraps things up. Again, thank you all. Greatly appreciate all the work that you do, and feel free to reach out at any time with any questions. Have a great rest of the day.